Starting your day with the most dependable traffic reports every 10 minutes. Mornings on 55 KRC, the talk station.
7:06 at 55 KRCD Talk Station. Hope you're having a, very happy Friday Eve. Hope you can join us at lunch today. Picnic out front. We are going to be saluting the first responders on this day we remember the 9/11 tragedy 13 years ago. And without further ado, since it was part and parcel of the speech last night with the ISIS crazies and Barack Obama's plans for war, Congressman Brad Wenstrup, welcome back to the 55 KRC Morning Show.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning.
Good morning. You heard him last night. Anything in Barack Obama's speech that surprised you last night? It sounded, if you had to sum it up, it was continued bombing campaign, expand bombing campaign into Syria, arm the moderates that are fighting not only ISIS but also Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and never put any troops on the ground, or combat troops anyway. Did I sum that up basically, Congressman Wenstrup?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, and arming and training as well the rebels.
You summed it up pretty well. First, let me just pay a little tribute to all those that 13 years ago and 2 years ago suffered 9/11 attacks on behalf of America, and for those that have served since. From there, let's go on to where we are. The president said he wants to degrade and destroy. He's gone to school a little bit since what he talked about last, because before he said those things and then he said he wanted to contain them. We know the objective of our enemy. They've made it very clear, haven't they? They have said, we want to come to America. We want the White House. We want to destroy you. And we know their objective, and last night he at least laid out an objective. Now, his strategy leaves a little to be desired. The strategy of using air, I get that. Using the Iraqi forces, that's a little bit tenuous. I see a force that has failed so far, and we're going to rely on them. I found it interesting, Brian. He said, we can't do for the Iraqis what they must do for themselves. Well, we can't rely on a force that has failed to complete our objective.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. And, of course, I don't know of any war that anybody has won exclusively with air power.
That's exactly right. I heard you talking about that. And I will tell you that a general that will be left unnamed has said, and I would agree, you never tell your enemy what you're not going to do. Yeah,
that seems, and this is many times he has done that. That there won't be any additional troops on the ground. There won't be any additional troops on the ground. Why would you even say that? If that's what you want, if you think your strategy is going to allow for that, fine. But don't say it out loud, because you have, you'll either turn yourself into a liar when you send troops on the ground later because you must, or you are going to unnecessarily limit the number of options you have to try to degrade and underlying destroy. You can't destroy without elimination.
Yeah, well, that's a political strategy as opposed to a military strategy.
Well, that's what he's all about, isn't it, Congressman Wenstrup? I mean, think about it. He could have made this speech 3 months ago when ISIS was still strong and not as strong, but took over northern Iraq already and already invaded a lot of Syria. He could have made this speech then and talked about the urgency and the need. But you know what? 3 months ago, Congressman, the public opinion polls were not in favor of it. And now, lo and behold, after two guys get beheaded, overwhelmingly America now supports an expanded military operation.
Well, he said we're better positioned today to do this. We're not better positioned.
No, we're not.
We were better positioned a year or two ago when we still had troops in Iraq.
Well,
we were much better positioned to, possibly deter the whole thing.
Yeah, and I mean, how can anybody argue better positioned when they have taken over and control more space now than they did a little while ago? It's been a rapidly expanding operation. Expanding means they've got more. We could have gotten them when they had less. Now, I mean, is this better late than never, Congressman?
Well, and that also, Brian, goes to the point with the use of counterterrorism, and going that route. I don't see that's really worked very well in Yemen and Somalia, which he claims were great successes, and they really have not been great successes. And this is a group that is taking territories, it is taking wealth, it's taking assets. He also said Islamic State, they're not Islamic and they're not a state. Well, they're becoming a state because they have a region that belongs to them basically right now. Yeah. And also not Islamic. Look, I'm not saying they're good Islamic people, but they are Islamic.
Yeah, they
I don't know what his point was with that.
They fight in the name of Islam and pushing for a very fundamentalist view of Islam. Their view is just happens to be a very twisted version of it, but it is a view. And if you think about state, I think Westerners are only the only people around that really have this distinct notion of a state must be defined by some internationally recognized borders. As you point out, Congressman Wenstrup, hey, if they occupy the territory and they're calling it a state, well, in their mind, it's a state. The Orwellian distinctions that we might draw don't matter to them.
That's exactly right. And looking at the big thing of what he had to say, he gave us an objective, right? He did say that we want to degrade and destroy them, but his strategies have holes in them. And you also have to have all the means, and that isn't really proven. And at the end of the day, when you develop a strategy based on your objective and you look at your means, you have to decide if it's feasible or not, and you have to do a risk assessment. And I don't think that's being done very well because I think there's a lot of holes in the whole plan.
Well, and there's a whole lot of unanswered questions, too, and I got to ask the most fundamental one because I'm going to get into this with Judge Andrew Napolitano at the top of the next hour. The legality of this. He has expanded, and here we get into the notions where borders do matter, at least under our law. He's expanded the bombing campaign to now bomb a separate, independent country that is absolutely not covered by the use of force agreement that was previously in effect, and I underscore, a use of force agreement that Barack Obama himself has already argued that it has expired. So, what is Congressman Brad Wenstrup's position on the need for congressional authorization to start bombing in a new country?
Well, I think anytime you take military action like this, if you plan to be successful, you have to have the American people behind you, and that would include Congress. And, those are the steps that he must take. And I think he's a little bit more sensitive to it, although it sounded last night like he's going to do it regardless.
Yes.
He's going to do what he wants to do regardless. But I think he's a little more sensitive to it after the Bergdahl exchange when he clearly violated the law that was in place specifically for an action like that, where he was to engage with Congress on that and did not.
I noticed not a whole lot happened in the aftermath of that, Congressman Wenstrup.
It's done. What do you can't bring him back, right?
So what's the law matter? I mean, seriously,
right.
This is a legitimate question. If his violating the letter of the law, and he did with that exchange, if that doesn't result in consequences, then the law is pointless.
Well, it seems like that, and we can go off on a tangent on that.
I don't know if it's much of a tangent because, listen, last night, like you said, he's going to start bombing Syria, whether the law allows him to do it unilaterally or not. Again, if there are no consequences for doing that, then there is really no law. I mean,
well, there really are some gray areas on this, Brian.
Yeah.
And I'll be curious to hear what the judge has to say because we've developed these gray areas. President Bush said if you harbor a terrorist, you are a terrorist, and we're coming after you. Many would interpret the initial use of force, al-Qaeda and its affiliates, really wherever they may be. Some would say only if they were responsible for 9/11. And others will say, well, these are the same groups that were responsible for 9/11.
But
same cast of characters. So these are the arguments. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Those are the arguments taking place.
And I get it, but I think the experts have pointed out that this ISIS group are people that al-Qaeda didn't even want to associate with. So,
Yeah, but several groups have, Brian. Several of the al-Qaeda affiliates, many throughout Africa and the Middle East have aligned themselves with ISIS and say that they support them.
I'm glad you brought up Africa, Brad, because when are we going to start bombing the radicals and the terrorists in Africa, the ones that have, like the Boko Haram folks, the Procol Haram, as I like to call them, that stole all those girls and kidnapped all those children and murdered all those people?
Procol Haram does come through my mind every time. Too, Brian, but that's our age, right?
Yep.
We do have operations taking place in the African nations where we are helping to train them to take care of their situation themselves. There are good relationships that are taking place. We've become state partners in certain areas to try and upgrade that training. I went to Africa this year. I think these are good strategies. We can't be everywhere. We're not supposed to be everywhere, but we'd like to create allegiances and allies with some of these African nations and let them manage it as best they can and prove their ability to do that.
Well, I hope you stick around because we're going to have another segment with Congressman Brad Wenstrup. I'm going to find out when we're bombing Syria, we're going to ask for Bashar al-Assad's permission because he insisted that we need it, and what's the likelihood of him denying that permission? Don't go away. We'll continue with Congressman Brad Wenstrup. After this quick word for the Chimney Care Company. Chimney Care Company taking care of your comfort and your safety. And let's start with safety because, yeah, I saw the temperatures dropping down to 55 tonight. Now, not exactly fireplace weather yet, but it's coming, and it's going to be another cold winter. At least that's what the experts are saying. So have your chimney inspected. You have peace of mind knowing that your chimney's not going to catch on fire. That's what happens with a dirty chimney. It's got a lot of tar and things built up in there. It'll catch on fire. And the second chimney fire is the one that may bring your house down. They say the first one will crack the lining of the chimney, and that will allow an avenue for a fire to get into the rest of the house. So don't let that happen. Talk to the experts at Chimney Care Company. They do sweeping, masonry repair, chimney caps, relining, and restoration. So after the inspection is done, their factory-trained installers and certified chimney sweeps can manage the service if it needs any. Then there's everything to do with chimneys. If you go to Chimney Care Company showroom, 413 Ward's Corner Road, you've got everything you need when it comes to fireplaces and chimneys. Of course, a huge selection of wood, pellet, gas stoves, freestanding stoves, fireplaces, and insert, and a full line of accessories. Let the Chimney Care Company take care of your comfort and your safety this year. 513-248-9600, 248-9600. Almost 7:20 at 55 KRC, the talk station. Hope you're having a wonderful Thursday. Tragic day being September 11th. Of course, 13 years ago we were attacked, and so it's difficult to have a positive spin on the day, but happy to have Congressman Brad Wenstrup on to talk about last night's speech, but also remind folks that, and Congressman, if you were in town, you would be here for the first responder picnic. We're putting on a big spread. Yep. A little freebie for everybody, and today's the day for it. 11 to 1 here at 8044 Montgomery Road for a free picnic to celebrate and salute the first responders. Back to last night's speech, Congressman Wenstrup, he mentioned Barack Obama did bombing Syria. We talked a little bit about that. Congressional authorization you suggest is necessary. But Bashar al-Assad, independent, he is the president of that country, whether we like him or not, and we typically don't because he's been a longtime state sponsor of terrorism. He's got a big problem on his hands with ISIS as well. But he's also said he doesn't want the United States bombing his country without his specific permission. Are we going to do it without asking him? Are we going to ask him with the expectation he's going to grant it? What do we do if he says no?
Well, currently, the areas we're talking about, he really doesn't have control in those areas.
But it is his state within it.
Yeah, well, I understand that. We talked a little bit earlier, obviously, about ISIS or ISIL actually having their own state right now because they do control a lot of territory as opposed to terrorists that do hit-and-run type of attacks. So I don't know how that's going to play out exactly. We'll see what the president decides to do as far as asking permission, but I think he's going to do it anyway. The borders are pretty much non-existent right now, but there's a lot of questions we have. We're going to have an Armed Services Committee meeting today. The president says that training the Syrian rebels, they've been vetted and this and that. I'm sure some of that has taken place to some degree, but we certainly need to have oversight over that, and I don't know that the president has the authority for that without congressional approval on that particular move.
Well, he's also asked for a $500 million. Question, will you be voting to approve the $500 million he's asked for training and arming these so-called moderate rebels in Syria?
Well, there's $85 billion in the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund as there is. He doesn't need to ask for $500 million.
That's kind of what I was thinking. We think about the CIA from time to time and what it does, and you can make book, and I'm certain that they're on the ground in around northern Iraq and maybe even in Syria, and they're working with people. So the CIA has a budget, and they're obviously they facilitate the purchase and transfer of guns and everything, and we never really kind of know how much money they're getting. So I'm sure there's enough money in the slush fund to manage this one.
Yeah, I don't know why he's put that out there because the money really is already there.
And what are the concerns that have been expressed? And I know, for example, Dick Cheney, and you even mention his name anymore, and eyes roll. He's been so demonized, but he's a fair assessor of our military might. Expressed some great concern over Barack Obama's eroding and curbing and cutting the military, thinning out the ranks of senior officers, reducing the size and scope of the American military to the point that it hasn't been this small since, I think, World War II or before World War II. How do we manage world conflicts and deal with this growing concern in the Middle East with a smaller military?
Well, they're diametrically opposed, really. I mean, you can't do that. And I've always been a big believer in deterrence. If you look at when we had one of our strongest militaries was during the Cold War, and we liberated a dozen or so nations without firing a shot. We have to be ready. Our readiness is a problem. And what are we getting ready for? Actually, the former vice president was here this week and spoke to us. He's been doing a lot of traveling overseas, and getting a lot of opinions from around the world. And there's a lot of fear that the United States is not what it used to be. You know, we used to be the nation where evildoers feared us and those that were in need prayed for our arrival. I hope we can still be that. But as we gut our military, it makes it difficult. You know, there's always been places to cut, but you know, the military's under discretionary spending, and that keeps getting squeezed. And until we face our monetary problems with entitlement spending and everything else, it's going to continue to be a problem.
Oh, well, that goes without saying, and you know, all of this world turmoil exists in a world where we are on unbelievably shaky financial foundation. You know, if you think about that, and if I think it's obvious that our role in the world as a police force has been established. Now, whether we should be, and we should be paying for that, but the reality is we're there, and we do bring about some global stability because of our global presence. If we can't, I mean, look at the degrading situation in the Middle East as a consequence of changed foreign policy.
Yes.
And that's by choice. Think of a time because of entitlement reform and a potential monetary collapse where we can't do any of it because we just can't. We don't have the means or the resources. Can you imagine a world in that aftermath?
I don't want to.
No,
but I fear going there. You know, it's interesting. If you think back, Brian, Joe Biden specifically came out and said the victory in Iraq may be one of the greatest accomplishments of the Obama administration.
Ooh. Well, you can just scratch that one off the list then, can't you? Now, what does that leave as an Obama administration accomplishment list?
Yeah, well, it doesn't leave much. But then he goes to saying, you know, I want to be perfectly clear. We're not going to fight the type of war we did in Iraq before. Well, you claimed victory. You claimed it as a great accomplishment, and now you're saying we're not going to do that.
Right.
It makes no sense.
Well, I'm used to that. Congressman Wenstrup, I'm used to that by now. Oh, and just FYI, Russia, since you mentioned, we talked a little bit about our American mind. I saw the story out of Reuters. They just carried out a successful test of their brand new Bulava intercontinental nuclear missile. It can go 8,000 miles. It holds 6 to 10 nuclear warheads and weighs in at 36.8 tons. Brand new. They're sticking with their upgrades, Congressman.
Yeah, they really respect the treaties. I guess. You know, another thing that was interesting last night, and I think a lot of people caught this, is when he went off and started talking about the recession and the economy and things like that. And to me, that was just a little bit of code word or code speech and trying to say it's all Bush's fault.
Yeah. He didn't utter those syllables, though, did he? Or those words?
No, he didn't. But I thought, why is he going there? That's not what this is about.
Because he's got nothing else to go on. Congressman Wenstrup, can I ask you, did you go thumbs up or thumbs down on extending the Export-Import Bank for another 9 months?
Well, I don't. Well, the question is, are we for it or against it? I think that it's the government involvement that should not take place.
Then you voted against the extension.
Well, we haven't voted on it.
Are you going to?
Well, let me talk to you about the strategy of all that.
Well, you want to stick around? Can you answer that? You want to stay for another segment?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I got to get this because this is the Export-Import Bank is a monstrous boondoggle for corporate America. It's crony capitalism at its best. 727-55 KRC, the talk station. Don't go away. We're going to hear from Rush Limbaugh, who says Democrats are going to do anything to advance their agenda. Well, there's a shocking revelation. Almost 7:32, 55 KRC talk station. Brian Thomas here with Congressman Brad Wenstrup. Standing in the next segment, talk a little bit about something unrelated to the Middle East, but a political hot potato, the Export-Import Bank, which is just a corporate boondoggle of the highest order. It was supposed to die by virtue of its creation. Built into the original Export-Import Bank, or whatever recent extension, was the death date. And if Congress doesn't act and does absolutely nothing, the Export-Import Bank goes away. That's what everybody wants to happen, except for the Democrats. But here I've been reading, Congressman Wenstrup, that the Republicans are going to reauthorize it for 9 months. Why? Please, in God's name, answer why they would do that.
Well, it's a very convoluted chessboard. Let me just start by saying, Chairman Hensarling, you know where he stands on this. You know what he's been trying to do. But see, what they do here a lot of times, as you well know, Brian, is they start bulking things together, right? Rather than just taking things one-on-one on its own merit. So I agree with the opposition to Ex-Im Bank, but there's a strategy that's taking place here, because the feeling is that if we just did nothing and we're working on a continuing resolution, the Senate is going to come back wanting a long-term 5-year extension. And then would this be something that we shut the government down on? So the Democrats right now would love to see us shut down the government. They would love to see that going into the November elections. So this is their strategy. So since we can't take this up on our own, if we do nothing, then it gives the Senate the opportunity to do something.
Well, wait a second. If there is no provision in the continuing resolution, which is going to keep the government running and funded, since we don't have a budget, then how can the Senate add it? I thought there had to be a corollary provision in the House bill in order for the Senate to tinker with it and add on to that.
No, they can add that on. They can add that on and send it back with that in it, and that's what we're trying to avoid, because they will push for a 5-year extension. And the only way that we can address it is if we put it in, and so what I would like it to be, if anything, minimal, and to avoid it. And as Chairman Hensling said, he wanted to do it for 2 months, so then we could take it up on its own merit.
Yeah, well, why not that? Why not a day? I mean, if it has to be in there in order for the House to address it, for fear the Senate's going to have its own way with 5 years or whatever ridiculous extension, why not just extend it for one lousy day?
Well, the only way that we can try to get this into its own merit is to take it away from a CR, from an increase in debt ceiling, and there are some Republicans that feel for their district that it's so completely necessary. So this is these are the moving parts, Brian, and I think it might be good too, because he's been so engaged with the conversation with everyone, is to get Chairman Hensling on with you, and I'll see if I can't make that happen.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, because he's really been engaged in it, and you know where he comes from. I mean, he said from the beginning, let it expire. So it's not something he wants, but he feels that this is the best strategy we have to look at it in the long term, to be able to get it isolated by itself if we can. Otherwise, the Senate's going to cram it down our throats, try and head us towards a shutdown over this issue, and that's what they want. And that's exactly what they would like to see happen.
And I know, and I just have to observe, because of the desire for the Democrats to have something to blame the Republicans on, even though it would be their fault. I don't know how they end up coming away unscathed on a government shutdown. That's the political dynamic. And as a consequence of the next election, the one in November, the political dynamic, I just have to observe the Republicans have conceded and given the Democrats pretty much everything they've wanted over the last several months. I mean, that's a reality.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think that we're making, we're doing a lot of defense. There's no doubt about it. But I think that, we're just looking at the chessboard the way it is. Many will say that the wind is at our back, and let's not screw this up, because let's face it, Brian, we've got a better chance of getting things done if we get the Senate. I mean, I asked somebody the other day, I said, who do you really like in Congress, House or Senate right now? And they said Ted Cruz. I said, well, if we had 435 Ted Cruzes in the House, we would still have some of the same problems that we have, because we don't have the Senate. So, this is the chessboard that we face. So it's an ugly situation, if you will, and it's a lot of moving parts. And this is where I think it's going to head. It's been put off because of the president's request for money, which I'm not sure why he's requesting it. So the continuing resolution won't be voted on today. It'll be pushed to next week. It may change in some ways before then. And I can tell you, Jeb Hensling said he'll be voting for the continuing resolution with that 9-month extension in it, because he feels it's the only way we can get to really making either a change in the Ex-Im Bank or getting rid of it.
Well, and I guess I have to observe, you could have the entire House, well, not the entire, but I think the likelihood of getting a veto override majority in both houses is kind of slim. So what I'm looking at is a change dynamic. Let's see, the Republicans take over the Senate. Mitch McConnell becomes Senate Majority Leader. You guys pass something in the House. The Senate adopts it and passes it, sends it up to Barack Obama, who promptly vetoes it with his central finger extended and a smirk on his face. I just don't see the dynamic changing even after the election with those kind of odds.
Well, if it was a straight up and down vote, I think it'd be clear. I would be against it, and we'll see how it looks in the CR next week. But the chairman makes a good case for delaying it if we want to win in the long run.
Congressman, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Congressman Brad Wenstrup, look forward to having you on again. And, yeah, if you want to hook me up with my listeners, actually up with Mr. Hensling, love to have him on. And, of course, anybody else on topical issues. It's great to be able to speak with people and get candid responses.
Hey, I'll try to catch him today and see if he has time to talk to you.
Brad, always great having you on, man. Have a great week. 738, 55 KRC, the talk station. Stick around. We're going to continue. 749-5500, pound 550, AT&T phone. Care to make a comment? I got a couple of emails while I was talking to Brad. We would go over some of people's reactions after word for Tano Bistro. Love Tano Bistro. Go there all the time with my wife and my family. I go there by myself sometimes. Lunch. We've had business lunches there many times, also dinner. And, of course, you have the Sunday brunch as well. Menu changes regularly. Get online and check out the online menu. You're going to see some fantastic descriptions of food. Let me tell you, I've had most everything on the menu, and it's all really good. And they're caterers, too. They do fantastic catering work. Quality of the food, same with catering. It is in the restaurant. So next time you're interested in a bite to eat, head on into old downtown Loveland. Gorgeous, cute, fun, old school kind of Loveland. Great things going on in downtown Loveland, especially Tano Bistro and Catering, just a few steps from the Loveland bike trails. Tell them Brian said hi when you stop on in. Online, it's foodbytano.com, foodbytano.com, 683-TANO.